Of all the figures inside the British royal family, there is one who has mastered the rarest and most underestimated form of power, the power of saying nothing at all. For more than 50 years, while scandals erupted and marriages collapsed and the tabloids feasted on every whispered rumor, Princess Anne simply kept working, kept her head down, kept her mouth shut, and let the storms pass around her like weather she had no intention of acknowledging. She does not give interviews. She does not gossip. She does not explain herself, defend herself, or feed the endless hunger of a public desperate to know what the royals really think of one another. Her silence has become almost a legend in its own right, a wall so consistent and so impenetrable that when she does choose to speak, when she finally opens her mouth on a subject she has guarded for decades, the words land with a weight that no press release or palace statement could ever match. And that is exactly what makes the moment she finally gave her verdict on Queen Camilla so extraordinary. Because Princess Anne, the woman who never tells you what she thinks, the sister who watched the entire saga unfold from the very beginning, chose at last to say a handful of words about the woman now wearing a crown beside her, brother. And those words, just 5 of them at the heart of it, sent a quiet shock through everyone who understood precisely who was saying them and exactly how much history sat behind them. To grasp why Anne's opinion carries such force, you have to understand who she is and what she represents inside the family. She is the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, the second-born child, and for her entire life, she has been the royal who refused to play the game the way the others did. While her brothers chased headlines and stumbled into controversy, Anne built a reputation as the hardest working member of the entire family, year after year topping the lists for the most engagements completed, traveling the country and the world on behalf of hundreds of charities, asking for no praise and accepting no excuses. She is famously blunt, famously practical, famously impatient with nonsense and spectacle. She has been described as the closest thing the modern monarchy has to its late queen, sharing her mother's iron sense of duty, her economy of words, her refusal to be drawn into the emotional theater that consumes so much of royal life. When people in Britain talk about who truly embodies the old royal creed of never complain and never explain, the name they reach for first is not the king, and it is certainly not any of the younger generation. It is Anne. She is the keeper of that code, the living proof that restraint can be its own kind of authority. And so her silence is not emptiness, it is discipline. It is a choice made again and again over half a century, a deliberate refusal to spend her words cheaply. Every time a microphone has been pushed toward her, every time a journalist has tried to coax some revelation out of her about her brother, about Diana, about the endless dramas of the House of Windsor, she has given them nothing. A look, a clipped remark, a change of subject. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, that in a family where everyone is desperate to control the narrative, the person who says the least often holds the most power. Think of everything she has lived through and never publicly discussed. She was there through the fairy tale of her brother's first marriage, and there through its slow and agonizing unraveling. She was there for the years when the family seemed to be tearing itself apart in full view of the world, when every leaked phone call and every wounded interview became a national event. She was there for the loss of Diana and the grief and the recrimination that followed, there for the abdication crises of reputation that struck her younger brother Andrew, there for every chapter of turmoil that the House of Windsor has endured across the past 5 decades. Through all of it, she said almost nothing. She did not write a memoir. She did not sit for confessional interviews. She did not settle scores or air grievances or offer the public the inside account it craved. She simply carried on, doing the work, honoring the institution, keeping her counsel locked away where no one could pry it loose. That is a level of self-control almost impossible to imagine in the modern age, when everyone is encouraged to share everything, and it is the foundation on which her extraordinary credibility rests. The words she does not say cannot be twisted. The opinions she keeps to herself cannot be turned into weapons. Her silence is a fortress, and she has defended it with a consistency that has earned her a reputation for integrity that few other royals can match. So when that fortress opened, just slightly, just enough to let a verdict slip through, the whole world leaned in to listen. Now consider the woman she was speaking about, and the tangled, decades-long history that binds the two of them together, because this is not a story of two strangers. Anne and Camilla have known each other for the better part of 50 years, and the history between them is far more complicated and far more personal than most people realize. It reaches back into the 1970s, into a web of relationships so intertwined that it almost defies belief. Before Camilla became the wife of a king, before she was even married to her first husband, the lives of these two women were already crossing in ways that would link them forever. Because the man Camilla would go on to marry, Andrew Parker Bowles, the dashing army officer who became her first husband and the father of her 2 children, had once been romantically involved with Princess Anne herself. In the years before he married Camilla, Andrew and Anne had a relationship of their own, a connection that placed these two women on opposite points of the same romantic triangle decades before Charles ever placed a crown on Camilla's head. It is the kind of detail that sounds invented, too neat and too dramatic to be true, and yet it is part of the genuine, documented history of these intertwined lives. The same man stood at the center of both their stories. Andrew Parker Bowles dated the king's sister, then married the woman who would one day become the king's wife. And across all the years that followed, across Camilla's marriage and divorce, across her long and painful journey from the most reviled woman in Britain to its crowned queen, Anne watched. She watched from the inside, from the closest possible vantage point, with a knowledge of the people and the events that no biographer or commentator could ever fully access. She knew Camilla not as a tabloid villain or a public symbol, but as a real person, a woman she had known for half a lifetime, through every twist and turn of one of the most scrutinized love stories of the modern age. And that is the heart of why her verdict matters so much. If anyone in the world had grounds to be cool toward Camilla, to harbor old resentments, to view her ascent with skepticism or distance, it might reasonably have been Anne. The shared history with Andrew Parker Bowles, the long years of family turmoil, the loyalty any sister might feel during the painful saga of her brother's first marriage and its collapse, all of it could have hardened into a quiet disapproval that Anne, true to form, would simply have kept to herself forever. The public might never have known what the Princess Royal truly thought of the woman who had become her sister-in-law and her queen. Her silence on the subject could have been read 1,000 ways, and in the absence of any clear word from her, the rumors and the speculation filled the vacuum, as they always do. There was, in fact, one persistent piece of gossip that captured exactly this assumed tension. In the swirl of stories surrounding the coronation, it was alleged by some tabloid sources that, on the eve of the great ceremony, at a glittering dinner held inside Buckingham Palace, Anne had pulled Camilla aside and delivered a sharp little correction about her title. According to the claim, which circulated through the press and was repeated by a former royal dressmaker on a television program, Anne supposedly reminded Camilla that she was not the queen, but the queen's consort, a pointed distinction that, if true, would have been a cutting reminder of rank delivered at the most sensitive possible moment. The story spread quickly because it fit the narrative people wanted to believe. The narrative of a frosty, disapproving Anne keeping the upstart Camilla in her place. It was the kind of rumor that thrives precisely because Anne never speaks, because her silence leaves so much room for others to imagine the worst. But here is where the story takes its genuinely surprising turn, the turn that left so many royal watchers stunned. Because when Anne finally did speak, when she broke her long-held silence and offered an actual on-the-record assessment of Camilla, what came out of her mouth was not a put-down, not a frosty correction, not the cold dismissal that the rumors had led everyone to expect. It was the opposite. In a rare and remarkable interview given for the BBC documentary that chronicled the coronation year, Anne sat down and did something she almost never does. She spoke openly and warmly about her sister-in-law, and the verdict she delivered was so generous, so clear, and so unmistakably sincere that it reframed everything people thought they knew about how she really felt. She began by acknowledging the depth of their shared history, noting that she had known Camilla a long time, off and on, a phrase that quietly gestured toward the decades of connection between them without dwelling on any of its complications. And then she said the thing that mattered most, the thing that cut straight through every rumor and every assumption. She said that Camilla's understanding of her role and how much difference it makes to the king had been absolutely outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. From Anne, the toughest grader in the entire family, the woman who does not hand out praise lightly and has spent a lifetime being unimpressed by spectacle, those two words carried the force of a royal seal of approval. This was not faint praise or polite diplomacy. This was the most respected and most demanding member of the family declaring in public that Camilla had done her job superbly. But she did not stop there, and it is the next part that contained the 5 words that truly define the moment. With characteristic honesty, refusing to pretend or to flatter, Anne acknowledged the truth of how difficult Camilla's position had always been. She admitted that the role of queen was not something Camilla would have been a natural for, a strikingly candid recognition of just how unlikely and how hard-won Camilla's journey to the crown had been. And then, having granted that honest caveat, Anne delivered her verdict in 5 plain and devastating words. She does it really well. 5 words. No flourish, no exaggeration, no sentimentality, just the flat, final, unanswerable judgment of a woman who never says anything she does not mean. She does it really well. Coming from anyone else in the family, it might have passed unnoticed. Coming from Princess Anne, it was the closest thing to a coronation of its own, an endorsement so authoritative that no one could question it. To understand the full power of those 5 words, you have to remember the contrast they cut against. For decades, Camilla had been the woman the public would not forgive. She had been cast as the villain of a national tragedy, blamed for the unhappiness of a beloved princess, hounded and vilified in ways that few public figures have ever endured. Her every appearance had once been met with hostility, her name spoken with contempt, her presence beside Charles treated by much of the country as an offense. The journey from that place to a crown in Westminster Abbey was one of the most improbable rehabilitations in modern royal history, accomplished inch by painful inch over the course of nearly 30 years through sheer endurance, patience, and an unflashy commitment to duty. And now at the end of that long road, the verdict that confirmed her arrival came not from a publicist or a sympathetic journalist, but from the one member of the family whose judgment could not be bought, flattered, or faked. Anne, who owed Camilla nothing, who had every reason of history to withhold her blessing, gave it anyway, freely and clearly, because in her assessment it had been earned. And then Anne added one final observation that revealed something even deeper about how she sees her sister-in-law's contribution. She noted that Camilla provides a change of speed and tone, a quiet acknowledgement of the particular gift Camilla brings to the often stiff and formal world of royal duty. It is an insight that only someone who has worked alongside Camilla, who has watched her in countless rooms and at countless engagements, could offer. Camilla, for all the controversy that once surrounded her, is known within the family for her warmth, her humor, her ability to put people at ease, to lighten a moment that might otherwise feel heavy with protocol. She brings a different rhythm to the monarchy, a softness and an ease that balances the more reserved temperaments around her. And Anne, the most reserved of them all, the one least inclined to value charm over substance, recognized that quality and named it as a genuine strength. It was, in its understated way, one of the most thoughtful things anyone in the family has ever said about Camilla in public. The brilliance of Anne's verdict lies in its honesty, the way it refuses to airbrush the difficulty out of Camilla's story. She did not pretend that Camilla was an obvious or inevitable queen. She did not rewrite history or gloss over the obstacles. She acknowledged plainly that this was not a role Camilla would have been a natural for. And that acknowledgement is precisely what gives the praise its credibility. Empty flattery would have meant nothing. A bland statement of support would have been forgotten in a day. But a hard-edged, clear-eyed assessment from the family's most exacting member, one that named the difficulty and then declared that Camilla had overcome it and performed superbly, that was something else entirely. That was a verdict with teeth, an endorsement that meant exactly what it said because it came from someone who never says more than she means. And this is why the silence and the speech belong together in this story, why you cannot understand one without the other. Anne's words landed so powerfully precisely because she gives so few of them. If she were a chatterbox, forever offering opinions and commentary, her praise for Camilla would have been just another quote in an endless stream. But because she hoards her words, because she has spent a lifetime refusing to spend them, the rare occasions when she does speak carry an authority that more talkative royals can only dream of. Her silence is the bank that gives her words their value. When the woman who never speaks finally speaks, you listen and you believe her, because you know she would not have bothered to say it if she did not mean it absolutely. You can see this same dynamic, this same quiet respect, operating in real life, in the way the two women actually conduct themselves around one another at official engagements. There was a telling moment at the University of London where Anne serves as Chancellor when she presented Camilla with an honorary doctorate. At one point during the visit, in a gesture of warmth and informality, Camilla invited Anne to enter a room ahead of her, a small courtesy between sisters-in-law. And Anne, ever the stickler for the proper order of things, declined. She would not go first. Because under the formal rules of royal precedence, the Queen outranks the Princess Royal, and Anne, of all people, was not about to break protocol even when invited to. It was a small thing, almost invisible, but it spoke volumes. Anne was insisting, quietly and firmly, on giving Camilla the respect her position demanded. She would not walk ahead of the Queen. She would honor the rank, observe the hierarchy, and treat her sister-in-law with the full deference the crown deserves. In that single moment of refusing to step forward, Anne said as much about her regard for Camilla as any interview ever could. Put it all together, the deep history, the shared connection to Andrew Parker Bowles, the decades of watching from the inside, the rumors of frostiness, the persistent assumption that Anne must surely disapprove, and then set against all of that the actual words she chose to speak, and the picture that emerges is a remarkable one. It is the picture of a woman who, despite every reason the world imagined she might have to withhold her blessing, gave it instead, with a clarity and a generosity that took many by surprise. The 5 words at the center of it, "She does it really well," became a kind of summary of the entire transformation, the moment when the family's hardest judge confirmed what Camilla had spent a lifetime trying to prove, that she belonged, that she was equal to the role, that the crown sat rightly on her head. To appreciate the magnitude of that confirmation, you have to measure the distance Camilla traveled to. Reach it. There was a time, not so very long ago, when the idea of Camilla being crowned at all seemed unthinkable, when polls showed the public firmly against it, when her name could not be mentioned without reigniting old wounds. She was kept in the background for years, introduced to public life in the most cautious increments, her every step managed and measured to avoid provoking the lingering resentment of a nation that had not forgiven her. She endured it all without complaint, attending the engagements, supporting the causes, standing quietly beside Charles through every storm, slowly and patiently demonstrating that she was there to serve and not to seek the spotlight. It was a masterclass in the very qualities Anne values most: duty, persistence, and a refusal to demand the affection she had not yet earned. And perhaps that is why, in the end, it was Anne of all people who recognized what Camilla had achieved, because Anne understood better than anyone what it costs to serve without applause. There is something almost moving in the way these two very different women have arrived at this point. Anne, the dutiful daughter who never wanted the spotlight and never sought to be loved, only to be useful. Camilla, the woman who was loved by no one for the longest time and had to earn, painfully and slowly, the acceptance that others were simply given. They could hardly be more. Different in temperament, the one all reserve and restraint, the other all warmth and ease. And yet, across the long and winding history that connects them, a genuine respect has formed. The kind of respect that is not declared loudly, but demonstrated quietly in honorary doctorates and observed protocols and rare, carefully chosen words spoken to a documentary camera. Anne did not need to say anything about Camilla. Her silence would have been the easier and the more characteristic choice. That she chose to speak at all, and that what she chose to say was so unequivocally kind, tells you that the regard between them is real. And it tells you something larger about the monarchy itself in this new era. The institution has spent years trying to convince a skeptical public that Camilla deserves her place, that the controversies of the past are truly behind her, that she has become an asset to the crown rather than a liability. Press teams and biographers and sympathetic commentators have all made that case, but their voices are easy to dismiss, because making that case is, after all, their job. What they cannot manufacture is the spontaneous, unsolicited endorsement of someone with no reason to give it and every reason to stay silent. Anne's verdict cannot be dismissed as spin, because Anne does not do spin. She does not perform. She does not say things for effect. When she declared that Camilla had been absolutely outstanding and that she does it really well, she handed the monarchy something more valuable than any public relations campaign could ever produce: the authentic seal of the family's most trusted and least sentimental member. The rumor of the Coronation Eve dig, the alleged correction about being a consort rather than a queen, looks very different in the light of what Anne actually said on the record. Perhaps the dinner exchange happened in some form, a passing remark blown out of proportion by sources eager for a story of conflict. Perhaps it never happened at all, an invention that spread because it confirmed what people already assumed. Either way, the words Anne chose to say, deliberately, on camera, for the historical record, were words of praise, not correction. If there had been real, lasting frostiness between them, Anne had the perfect opportunity to let it show simply by saying nothing, by maintaining the silence she has maintained on so many other subjects. Instead, she broke that silence to lift Camilla up. And in the careful arithmetic of royal communication, where what you choose to say in public is always a deliberate act, that choice speaks louder than any whispered rumor from a banquet hall. This is the quiet genius of how the Princess Royal moves through the world. She does not fight the rumors. She does not issue denials or demand corrections or wage war against the press narratives that swirl around her family. She simply waits, and then, at the moment of her own choosing, she says the one thing that settles the matter for good. 5 words, delivered without drama, that cut through years of speculation and put the question to rest. She does it really well. There is no arguing with it, no spinning it, no twisting it into something else. It is the final word from the one person whose word counts for the most, and it closed a chapter that the rest of the family and the rest of the country had been arguing about for the better part of 3 decades. So when you hear that Princess Anne delivered a stunning verdict on Camilla's crown, that the palace was left reeling by what she said, understand what really happened beneath the headline. The most silent, the most stoic, the most respected woman in the royal family chose to break her habitual silence and speak about her sister-in-law, and the verdict she gave was not the cold dismissal so many expected, but a warm, honest, and authoritative endorsement that no one could challenge. She named the difficulty of Camilla's path, and then declared, in 5 unforgettable words, that Camilla had risen to it completely. It was praise made unbreakable by the honesty that surrounded it, and approval made priceless by the rarity of the woman who gave it. In a family where words are weapons and silence is armor, Anne lowered her guard just long enough to grant Camilla the one blessing that could not be bought. And then she raised it again, having said all that needed to be said. That is the true power of Princess Anne. Not the engagements, not the charities, not the lifetime of tireless service, impressive as all of that is, but this rarer thing, the ability to stay silent for so long that when she finally speaks, the whole world stops to listen, and the few words she offers become the verdict that history remembers. She does it really well. 5 words from the woman who almost never speaks, about the woman who spent a lifetime fighting to be accepted. And in those 5 words, the long and improbable journey of Queen Camilla found its quiet, definitive, and entirely unexpected conclusion. The silence had spoken, and what it said changed everything.